Hello and welcome to the Dailies on Network Television International, where we keep you updated on what is happening from the papers this morning. I am Sarah Elisha Dasham. We're live on Facebook and on YouTube. You can do well, drop your comment and your contribution. And I have Rachel Tanze, who we will be doing this together. Good morning.
Morning, Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great, thank you. Let's quickly run through the papers, starting with the New Telegraph newspaper.
On New Telegraph, statistics, federal government to spend 5.3 billion naira on birth and death database. Buhari to confer highest national honor, GCFR on Tinubu May 25th. Statutory revenue dips by 141.21 billion naira as FAAC shares April allocation. We can see that the federal allocation keeps dropping, and we hope something is being done about it. You can find the details on page 7. Buhari's ally to Tinubu, APC North, will withdraw its support if we have PEPT reserves ruling on Atiku's application seeking live broadcast of proceedings. Tickets sold in dollars, federal government loses battle to foreign airlines. UK tells citizens don't travel to Anambra and others. You can find the details inside the paper on page 5 and 6. And the big story on New Telegraph, National Assembly leadership plot to alter rules looms ahead inauguration. We have as APC moves to allow Tinubu, Adamu, witness and reps voting pattern. You can find the details on page 2 and 5. We have Sultan laments insecurity resurgence after 2023 polls. The details can be found on page 3. Coming from MPC, why census was postponed after gulping over 200 billion naira. If you should want to know the details, you can find it on page 4. And I believe it's important, Sele, because the census has been something that has been ongoing. They've had a lot of training that so much money was being put into it. We saw since last year the federal government has approved over 300 billion for them, and also they've been relying on foreign aid because that was majority, because it's not only Nigeria that is hoping to know our population alone, but other bodies around international countries want to know what actually is our population. So they've been having foreign aid for it, and now we are seeing that over 200 billion of what the federal government has already given is gone, and it has been postponed, and trainings have been given. There are people who have benefited, have received allowance for the training, have even been paid for a census that was conducted to test the machine and all of that, because things like that have been going on. So I just hope that the MPC will not only give a figure of saying 200 billion has been gone, because this is a lot of money. We're looking at almost the same figure spent during the election. Yeah. So I just hope that we will not just hear this, but let them come out exactly to say what the money was used for and how much is needed to go forward when finally the next administration comes in and step in, because we keep saying we don't take accountability seriously in this country, and that's why there's a lot of misappropriation or misuse of funds in the country. And I just hope that something will be done about it. You can find the details on page 4. Abure to Apapa, tell your paymasters you're too old for the assignment. You can find the details on page 5, and that's all the news on New Telegraph.
On the Punch newspaper, starting with a big story, Tinubu's inauguration programs begin Thursday. Federal government invite over 65 world leaders with the right to stay away from inauguration venue if you don't have business there, coming from the Secretary General of the Federation. And then Buhari hands over transition document to the incoming president on Thursday. So we already have a rundown of programs starting from Thursday. You know, we have about 54 countries in Africa, which of course most of the leaders have indicated interest that they will be coming for the inauguration. So we have seen that over 65 65 world leaders are actually coming for the inauguration. And we hope that everything Transition Committee have been giving us updated, and no wonder the chairman of the Transition Committee, Boss Mustafa, who is the Secretary General of the Federation, said, if you have no business with the inauguration, stay away, because of course it's strictly by invitation. So if you don't have any invitation whatsoever, stay away. So I think this should be a strong warning to every other person that has no business whatsoever to stay away. We saw already warnings coming from the military, the IGP, also talking about those who are planning to cause trouble before and also during the inauguration. So I just hope that we'll just have a very peaceful transition, and then everything that is happening in the court, even though the court is still, we're still having hearings in the court, everything should just work out well, because above every other thing, we need peace and sanity in this country at a time like this. So we keep our fingers crossed. So you can read more detail of that story on page 2. Still on the Punch newspaper, federal location drops again as federal government state shares 655 billion naira. We just hope to know what each of these states are hoping to do with the share they will actually get. We hope to see more being done. Coming from Tinubu's lawyer, live broadcast threat to tribunal judge's life. You can find detail why he said that on page 7. NNPCL begins crude supply to Dangote refinery next week. You can find that story inside the paper. And we can see NYSC at 50 with the picture story. Buhari grants 65 ex-coppers automatic employment and scholarship, because we saw it where people were celebrating with so many throwback pictures, of them while they were serving. And we've seen the president have given about 65 ex-corps members. And we don't know the criteria that they use to actually grant the scholarship and also employment. But we just hope that those who are giving will actually deserve it. They should be based on merit and not based on maybe tribe,
connection, or who you know.
Whatsoever.
Yes, we just hope that's not it.
All right. So still on the Punch newspaper, we have Matawale diverted 70 billion naira with 100 firms. EFCC alleges. You can find the story on page 7. To head over U.S. calls out officials killing. We are happy. Yesterday we saw callers asking that no arrest has been done, and we have seen here that two people have been held over that. So you can find more on page 7. Osun workers protest as Adeleke begins payroll audit. You can find that on page 12, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, port congestion looms over suspension of banks' import duty collection. You can find the details on page 19. U.S. convoy attacks, police arrest 2 suspects. Gunmen kidnap corps members returning from camp in Rivers. NNPCL clears $3.8 billion JV cash called indebtedness. You can find the details on page 8. Media play a crucial role to avert crisis, wars coming from Sultan, the Khan, and then the SGF. And the big story on Vanguard newspaper, patients groan as doctors strike enters day 2. Exodus hits government hospitals as private hospitals record BRICS businesses. You can find the details on page 13. And on the Sheikh Kutib arrest, court extends detention by 4 days. Bawa must quit now, CSOs tell the federal government. Still on the 10th National Assembly and inauguration, opposition parties worry over bid to alter rules. You can find the details on page 5. The writer following that says to allow President APC chair witness reps voting pattern. Opposition parties join forces with Abbas. Why I chose Abbas over Betere. This is coming from Gagdis and other speakership aspirants. We have regrets installing Tambuwal as speaker in 2015. Rebellion against APC will not stand, coming from Abbas. And at the downside of the paper, we have Montgomery appointed new British High Commissioner to Nigeria. We have a column on page 17 of Owe Lakem Farm, and we have another column for sports that says FIFA helped Messi Argentina win 2022 World Cup. If you want to argue that, find the details on page 31. We have a picture story that says NYSC at 50, and that's all the news on the Vanguard newspaper.
On the Friday Leadership newspaper, 10 days to go, tribunal rules today on Atiku's motion for live coverage. So you can do well to read the story on the front page of the paper and more on page 7. And we have no litigation can stop Tinubu's inauguration, federal government declares, with the writer CSO finger foreign bodies in plot to stop president-elect Tinubu Shaitima to get the GCFR GCON honors. You can find that on page 4. And on the Labour Party crisis, Abure Apapa returned to trenches. You can find that on page 7. Court extends Shehu Kuti stay in police custody by 4 days. Despite meeting with Tinubu, Kanu APC won't accept Kwankwaso. You can find more of that story inside the paper. And the last story here, Matawale will be arrested for 70 billion naira fraud, says the EFCC. You can find more detail of that story inside the paper, and that's all on the Friday Leadership.
On Nigerian Tribune, direct entry UTME candidates now to write same exams. JAMB remits 2 billion naira into federal government's account. Buhari to confer GCFR, GCON titles on Tinubu Shetima. May 25th, federal government rolls out inauguration program. We have a Buhari presidency review that you can find inside the paper on page 3 to 19. The big story, EFCC boss Zamfara governor exchange words over alleged 70 billion naira fraud. Expose me if you have any proof of fraud, statement coming from Bauer. Bauer must quit now, face probe panel over 150 CSOs tell federal government. You can find the details on page 3. Still on Nigerian Tribune, El Rufai revoked CFO of McCarthy's companies and landed properties. Court remands Shehu Kuti for additional 4 days. NNPC clears $3.8 billion JV cash call indebtedness to grow crude oil production to 1.8 million barrels per day in July. We're looking forward to that as our production keeps dropping every day. You can find the details on page 6. Attack on U.S. officials in Anambra. 7 confirmed killed, 2 missing as police begin search. 2 suspects arrested. You can find the details on page 25. Speakership race, G7 aspirants vow to fight on. One person can't run Nigeria, choose leadership for members elect. This is coming from Wahe. And at the downside of the paper, 200 billion naira already spent on preparation for 2023 census, NPC says. Osun Labour Movement kicks against proposed staff audit. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Daily Times newspaper, concerning electricity, Nigeria target 30 GW by 2030 as Buhari commissions dam. You can find the story on the front page and inside the paper. Nico 6.5 billion naira illegal contract deal rigs Senate. EFCC urged to implement National Assembly recommendations. You can find the story inside the paper. Nigerians' global community disastrous of supporting our democratic transition process, coming from the federal government. And on the 10th National Assembly leadership, Labour Party Oshutoku says APC criminalizing Nigerian politics with nominees. And another story, INEC Tinubu opposed live broadcast of the PEPC proceeding. Court reserves their judgment, so you can follow up to know if they will accept or not. And on human angle, man strangled 6-year-old boy in Adamawa. You get to find out why he did that on page 12. We have a picture story here too. You can do well to grab the Daily Times and read more details of stories of interest to you.
On Daily Sun newspaper, NNPC pays off $3.8 billion JV cash call debt, aims to grow crude oil production to 1.8 million barrels per day in July. And the big story on Daily Sun newspaper, May 29, no court can stop Tinubu's inauguration, a statement coming from the federal government. NSA warns unauthorized persons to stay away from Eagle Square. Buhari to convert Tinubu Shetima with GCFR and GCON. Anambra attacks, police arrest 2 race criminals calm in Ogbaru community. Umba Enugu governor-elect slams 20 billion naira lawsuit on NYSC. Buhari to diplomats, always respect cultures and traditional institutions. Zamfara governor facing 70 billion naira fraud and investigation going on by the EFCC, and we have 150 CSOs demand removal of agencies boss, and this has been going on for long now because the CSOs want Bauer out because so many times he has been around to go to court. He has refused being on the papers concerning contempt, and for so many reasons this has been lingering, and I think now they are back in full force because now we are having 150 CSOs saying they want him out. You can find the details on page 5 and 28. New moon, Sultan directs Muslims to look for crescents of Dhul Qa'dah. You can find the details on page 26. Despite postponement, NPC spends 200 billion naira on national census. Apabio hails Aisha Buhari over inauguration of AFLPM building. Elder statesman Ayim Ude, 82, dead. You can find the details on page 28. We have tribunal reserves ruling on Atiku Tinubu live broadcast request. Why we oppose it, coming from INEC and Tinubu. At the downside of the paper, call remand Shehu Kuti for additional 4 days. You can find the details on page 4. We have a picture story that says, from the left to the right, Emeritus Archbishop of Abuja John Cardinal Onyye Khan and President General Nigerian Supreme Court of Islamic Affairs, Co-Chairman Nigeria Interreligious Council, and Sultan of Sokoto Alhaji Mohammed Saad Abubakar III. We have Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, and President Christian Association of Nigeria, Archbishop Daniel Oka during NIREC's second quarterly meeting with team media in an effective leadership for nation building in Abuja yesterday. And that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, after 8 years and 15.9 billion naira on Nigerian Air, we have the story that says ministers score self 100% on failed carrier MRO airport concessions. You can find that big story on page 4 and 5 and read more detail to see if actually our air aviation system deserves this 15.9 billion naira that have been spent on it, and then what is the outcome of it. So you do well to grab the paper and read detail on page 4 and 5. And still on the issue of the politics and handing over the PEPC, INEC, Tinubu, APC kick against Atiku's request for live telecast of proceedings. You can find on page 3. PTC unveils transition activities, one unauthorized person to stay away from Eagle Square. And cash crunch caught telecom growth as operators lose 1.02 million subscribers. You can find on page 3. Nigeria hopeful for $32.5 billion oil project as NNPC eyes 1.8 million barrels of oil per day in July. You can find that on page 6. And we have residents blame shoddy job and lack of supervision in regard to the failed Ojora Bridge. You can find that on page 8. Still, we are having civil society organization demand Barber's exit over corruption allegation by Matawale. You can find that on page 29. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Daily Independent, federal government molds legal framework for presidential transition programs. The writer following that releases timetable for Tinubu Shetima's inauguration. Buhari confers highest national honor on Tinubu May 25th. Corruption allegations like Magu Bauer must quit now face prop panel, CSO tell federal government. I'm back as national chairman, no more faction in Labour Party, a statement coming from Abure. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper on page 20. Zamfara governor on the probe for alleged 70 billion naira fraud coming from the EFCC. We have crack in G7 as Dogoa, 2 other speakership aspirant back Abbas. Wike tackles Bayelsa government over demolished property. PEPC reserves ruling on Atiku's request for live broadcast. African Development Bank approves $15 million loan for infra credit to boost capital. You can find the details on page 7. Nigerian airlines decry high interest rate insurance premiums. Airpeace expends 60 billion naira on aircraft maintenance in 2022. At the downside of the paper, manufacturers expended over 76.7 billion naira on alternative power in the first half alone of 2022. You can find the details on page 13. We have a picture still showing the celebration of the National Youth Service Corps at 50. And that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On Nigerian news, the wreck on oil and gas, the catalyst to achieve desired double GDP coming from Wabute. You can find that story on page 16. And on Senate presidency, Uzunaso makes strong case for the Southeast, and ICPC secures 7-year conviction of fraudsters over $662,600 crude oil racketing. You can find that on page 2. With a big story on the paper saying Dangote refinery inauguration, NNPC vows to supply 300,000 barrels per day of crude oil as military destroy 38 illegal refineries and arrest 29 oil thieves. Recovers 551,500 liters of crude oil, 394,500 liters of diesel. You can find more detail of that story on page 3. Shareholders approve all resolution at Ecobank Transnational Incorporated 35 General Council meeting and the EGM. And we have corruption fighting back. Zamfara Governor Matawali under investigation for 70 billion naira fraud. This is coming from the EFCC. We have cross-section of various stories. One, we can see the governor of Lagos State and others up. You can also do well to grab the Nigerian News Direct and find more detail of the stories of interest to you.
On the Nation newspaper, we have spent 200 billion naira on postponed census, says NPC. NNPCL says NNPCL pays $3.8 billion JV cash call to rise production. And we have, you can find the details inside the paper on page 8. We have more stories saying Matawale on the probe for 70 billion naira fraud, says the EFCC. Transition Council rolls out Tinubu Shetima inauguration program. The big story on the Nation newspaper, governors will back Akpabio, Abbas, says Sule. You can find the details inside the paper, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the world of business and see what's happening on Business Day newspaper. More women clean seats at the Nigerian most valuable firms. You can do well to read who these women are and how they have actually make a very good, contribution by checking more on the front page and also page 29. How Buhari wasted social media capital he tapped to power. You can find more inside the paper on page 31. Buhari upheld financing but out-of-pocket payment be cloud legacy. NNPC to supply 300,000 barrels daily to Dangote refinery. You can find that story on page 2. NNPC clears S3.8. Okay, take that story. NNPC clears the S3.8 billion JV cash call carriers. You can find on page 7. And we have Nigeria's film industry grows on the AMVCA. A lot, we've been seeing pictures of those who'll be nominated. So you want to know more about that angle of the entertainment industry, do well to start on the front page and continue to read more of that story on page 29. And that's all on the Business Day newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Osimhen may struggle in EPL. Statement coming from Stam. Madrid trashing delights Pep. And we have Mappies keep top 4 hope alive. And on Europa, we have East Sevilla versus AS Roma in the finals. Messi's contract offer raised to 500 million euros. We have Hamas reach conference final. We have the big story that says patients are inclusive. There was sexual assault, but players didn't really say it out as everybody was trying to save their heads, because as soon as you said it, they might take you out of the team. But things like that couldn't happen to some of us, especially me. I will blow the whistle. And it's a sad thing to see somebody recalling something like that. She said, my Super Falcons Odyssey. You can find the details on page 6. West Ham to revive Maguire interest. Devils lease race for Ramos. We have Iheanacho returns to training. At the downside, we have Arsenal City dominant EPL awards. Montreal lead race for Hazard. You can find the details on page 3. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Right, before we move further with other paper reviews, looking at what is happening on the paper, back and forth with the Zamfara governor, EFCC, Bawa must go, and others still lobbying for the Senate presidency. A lot is actually happening. We also have that the presidency have also ruled out the program for the handing over, which is very, very important, where we have over 65 countries that will or have actually, show interest in attending the inauguration of the president. So you can do well to, go through the papers before we come back from the break, and then when we come back, we'll open the phone line so that we can also hear your contribution and your thoughts about any of the stories of interest to you. Please do stay tuned. Thank you for still staying in tune. The program is The Dailies, and we have been looking at various stories that have made it round on the papers. We've seen interest of actually boosting oil to about 1.8 million barrels per day, which is very interesting. We are hoping to see it going to even 200 million barrels per day, looking at the fact that we are still coming up as an oil producing country. We also saw a lineup of programs that will be following the handing over of the present president to the incoming president. We've also heard stories back and forth from, Zamfara governor and also with the EFCC boards, where we are also having civil organizations saying that Bawa must go. This has been going for quite a while right now, and they are coming out more, on the paper this morning. So our numbers are displayed on your screen. Please do well to call us. We love to hear what your thoughts are. Let's remember to be civil. Turn down the volume of your TV set when you call us, because we really want to hear what you have to say, and other viewers will also love to be part of what you were saying. You can do well to drop your comment on Facebook and YouTube. We'll take those comments too, as it relates to the stories on the paper, as they have Rachel with me here. Thanks, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, before we have our callers, streaming in, let's go to this day newspaper, where we have FEG disburses 655.9 billion naira April revenue to the federal government and states and local government area. You can find more of that on page 9. Even though I know, Rachel, we said the allocations being given, and we said we hope that we actually use this money judiciously. So. But we can see that, just like we say, the April revenues to federal government, states and local government. And I hope that, just like I said, we need accountability.
We do.
Because it's one thing for us to see the money being given to a particular state, and then we are seeing nothing whatsoever to actually say, yes, truly, this is where this money is going into. We've seen how much was being spent when in relation to aviation sector, but yet we are seeing that there was a strike from the union. A lot of people are even the aviation sector are decrying, like saying things are not working as it should be. So that shouldn't be the story we should be hearing oftentimes coming on our papers, that when a particular revenue is being generated, or if there's an allocation that is being sent to a particular, whether the local government, federal government, or the state, let us say it being used as it should be, not just on our papers, but then it should tell on the work that we see going on in the various states. Because a lot of governors, Rachel, you could recall that they are leaving their states with quite a number of debts.
A lot of it.
Very few of those states you can say, okay, through the years, the government took, or the governor of that state took this particular debt, and then yes, we can see what he did with the money.
True.
But then for most of the states, we really cannot say anything much about what was being done. We saw a time where the president even said, these governors are using the money they are supposed to pay the civil servants to do unnecessary projects. And we can tell it. A lot of states right now, civil servants are on strike. So that could tell that actually the president was not actually totally wrong when he said that. So we have to go back and check most of this revenue states generate. What do they use it for? Most of the allocation being sent to the states, what do they use it for? Do the local government get the allocation that's supposed to go to them? Are the local government developing as they should be? So a lot of this thing tells a lot about various states. So we hope to see things, accountability and auditing being done when a particular money is being sent to various states.
My concern, Sela, is the fact that the allocation keeps dropping because for April is now 655. For March it was 712. The previous month it was 722, and we can see that the numbers keep dropping. And it's only normal that the numbers keep dropping because we know that this revenue are mostly tax. We saw that in the previous paper it was mentioned that the statutory revenue has dropped, so which automatically, because it is the majority of what makes up the allocation, these statutory revenues are still taxes. These are just revenues that are generated in one way, and we know for sure that this allocation is not our oil revenue. It is not. These are mostly tax from businesses, and it's only okay. It's not okay, but we know why they keep dropping, because a lot of businesses are closing down. We're seeing the inflation, we're seeing the naira devaluing, and above all, we're seeing that the interest rate keeps going high, and which makes it more difficult for smaller businesses to be able to access loans or credit from the banks. And we know that a lot of businesses are shutting down and are not growing as they should be. So it's not surprising that our allocations are dropping or is not becoming any better. It's only normal like that we see something like that, in as much as it is a sad thing and shouldn't be expected. However, one of the challenges we're also facing is that the state government are not trying to generate revenue. Sele, that is one of our major problems in Nigeria, that the states are sitting down and waiting for the federal government to allocate money to them. So automatically, if it keeps dropping, it means whatever the state have budgeted for their expenditure, it means they will not be able to reach it in full, because now the allocation coming to them is less than what they expected. So automatically, it's not going to work like that for them. So now, what are the states doing to generate revenue that when the federal government allocation comes, it will just be a plus to them, not something that will put them. We will not have, like, for example, we can bring it down to Plateau because we are here. We have solid minerals. However, the government is not even in charge of up to 70% of the revenue that comes from our solid minerals. We have a caller.
Yes, sir, please do. Good morning.
Okay. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, my sisters. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
I'm calling from Kaduna.
All right, please, Mr. Shama, go on.
The Nigerian of the day is a nightmare to all Nigerians. We know what we are passing through in this country. Since 2015, it has never been well with Nigeria. I don't know why it is like this. People saw in Buhari a man that was coming to rescue Nigeria from what it was passing through. People saw in him another god of our time. But the irony is the case. I pray that we are going to get it right in this country if the next dispensation will give us dividend of democracy. The tribunal that are there, the judiciary, by God's grace, will pray that they will dispense justice with mercy, that the truth will come out, so that the actual person or the actual people that won the election in 2015 February and 18 March will take to throne, because enough of our suffering in this country. I pray that God in his infinite mercy will help the judiciary get things right for Nigerian masses. Good morning, my sisters.
Morning. Thank you so much, Shama, for that thoughtful and beautiful contribution.
Yeah. So, as I was talking about the federal government allocation and how states are not making effort towards generating some income, we have states that are doing good, while we have a lot of states that businesses are, state government businesses that are shutting down and were existing and no longer existing. Now, these are all the things that makes it impossible for states not to be owing workers, because when you look at it, what are the revenue, for example, the state, the civil servants at the state level, what revenues are they generating? Apart from, sure, we know the Internal Revenue Board in different states that, of course, generate revenue from tax, which is in virtually every state, and they remit it to the federal government, and we can see that there's something lagging behind. That's why we are having our allocations dropping. What are individual states doing to see that they have revenue generated within their state, that when the federal government allocation comes, it becomes a plus to them? And I believe that those was one of the statements that the president was hammering on, saying that the governors have been spending on projects that have not been yielding anything to the state. And not only are they not yielding anything to the state, they only stop at the capital of the state and doesn't go down to the state government. But once we have a government that is geared towards development of a state, you would definitely see a growth. We had an administration that made road available everywhere, and these roads only made it accessible for people to build businesses where on a normal day businesses couldn't thrive in certain area. Now, when the next administration come, you look for the way forward. What else can I do to boost the revenue of a state? But the truth is that a lot of states government are not really focusing on generating more revenue. I think we're in a position where we are comfortable with the local government, with the federal government allocation, that in the end it affects us, and states just keep going into more and more debt and not being able to pay their workers. We're looking forward to this kinds of thing not existing in our state government level.
Of course, Rachel. Well, let's look at other stories on this day newspaper. Court reserved ruling in Atiku's motion for live broadcast of proceedings. You can find on page 34. And we have EFCC probes Zamfara Governor Matawade over alleged 70 billion naira fraud. Says one contractor collected 6 billion naira on 10 billion naira contract without rendering any service. Another collected over 3 billion naira for medical equipment supply contract. Commission trace payment of 400 million naira from governor's account to the BDC operator. You can do well to read more detail of that story on the front page and on page 6. The big story coming from Buhari Jonathan conceding defeat in 2015, unprecedented and un-Nigerian, with the rider to bestow Tinubu with the GCFR title May 25th, urged diplomats to always respect nations' traditional institutions and cultures. Ex-president preaches integrity, good governance. Nothing can stop transition of power on May 29, says the Secretary General of the Federation. Court to decide whether to stop inauguration May 24th. So we keep our fingers crossed to see more of that coming up by next week, Wednesday. And we also have here a picture story. You can do well to read more about that. And downside, we have 2 arrested in connection with attack on the U.S. Embassy officials in Anambra. You can find more detail of that story on page 14. And that's all on this day newspaper.
On First News newspaper, Peter Obi raises the alarm over impersonators mimicking voice and calling people. I will attend tribunals Friday pre-hearing on Obi's petition, says Apapa. Don't allow Buhari's appointees leave Nigeria, CNG tells AFCC and ICPC. Litigations won't stop Tinubu's inauguration. The federal government is assuring people on May 29 as Transition Council warns unauthorized persons to steer clear of Eagle Square during swearing-in ceremony. Government releases 8-day event timetable for Tinubu's inauguration. Foreign local agents working to thwart Tinubu's inauguration coming from the CSO. El-Rufai marks 9 ex-Governor McCarthy's companies for demolition, revokes CFO. Abure of the suspended Labour Party leadership returned to party secretariat. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
All right, on the Voice of Liberty on kidnapping, Sultan Lamed, resurgence of insecurity in Kaduna and others. And on the speakership, Dugwa Makei Remi withdraw from race, endorses Abbas. Governor Matawadi under probe of 70 billion naira fraud coming from the EFCC. And on Tinubu's inauguration, stay away from Eagle Square Transition Council, one unauthorized person. The Presidential Transition Council has advised those who do not have business at the Eagle Square in Abuja on May 29 to stay off. Other stories here, we have protection of lives, property, key policy of Buhari's administration coming from Aregbesola. You can find more of that. EFCC chairman planning to travel before May 29, group alerts the DSS. So you can find more of that story inside the paper, and that's all on Voice of Liberty.
On the Matrix newspaper, we have a
call. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. Okay, I think we lost that call. Let's go on, please, Rachel.
On the Matrix newspaper, Reno Mokiri Beck's IGP says Sheikh Kuti is suffering from PTSD. You need to show us the proof, medical report saying that he has been suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. You can find the details on page 17. Haaland, De Bruyne, Kane, others vie for all 4 players of the season that's on the English Premier League. You can find the details on page 17. Federal government restates support to advancement of advertising industry. And the big story, Tinubu Shetima's 8-day inauguration timetable release. The writer following that, Buhari charges relevant government institutions to cooperate with and support the transition process. Engage with President-elect Team Buhari, others, all agencies. All events will be broadcasted live on all major stations and streamed on various social media platforms coming from the SGF. Police secure court permission to detain Sheikh Kuti till Monday, lawyer kicks. Federal government, states, local government share 655.9 billion naira April FAAC revenue. You can find the details on page 4. Banks asset rise to 78 trillion naira in the first quarter. This is a report coming from the CBN. You can find the details inside the paper on page 17. At the downside of the paper, police arrest 2 suspects over killing of U.S. Embassy staff in Anambra. We have a picture story. Buhari receives new UK High Commissioner Montgomery. From left to right, we can see President Muhammadu Buhari receive the new United Kingdom High Commissioner to Nigeria, H.A. Richard Hughes Montgomery, during the presentation of letter of credence held at the State House in Abuja. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Nature newspaper, where we have global temperatures will soar to record level in 5 years, coming from the WMO. So you can do well to find more detail of the global temperatures on the front page and also on page 3. And then also the big story, we have federal government, the Niger Basic Authority partner on climate change adaptation fund and environmental service. I think this is something everybody should do well to read more about on page 3. And we're having Nigeria loses 800,000 children yearly to malnutrition, coming from the World Bank. Now, it's not enough for us, Rachel, to have the World Bank telling us that Nigeria loses 800,000 children yearly to malnutrition. But what are we hoping to do as a country in regard to malnutrition? We keep saying we're talking about 133 million Nigerians suffering from poverty. And of course, when there's poverty, definitely there will be malnutrition. And you need to really take a good look at where children that are malnourished are. You know that a lot is happening, especially in the war zones. We've seen attacks in various parts of the country, and definitely that is always the aftermath of any war we have, because most times, I have said, it's not even the war or the crisis that mostly kill people, but it's the hunger that follows after that kill people. We're talking about even those in the IDP camps. Are they well fed? Of course not.
Of course not, Sarah.
And I take a look at other areas just recently right now. Okay, let's take a look at those that were attacking Mangu. Of course, they are now without any livelihood. So they are running, hoping to get something to eat. And if you can accommodate them, fine. I don't know if you've actually met them. Sometimes they meet you on the road, or even come house to house knocking and begging for food to be able to feed their kids. All right, sir, please go on. Good morning.
Okay. Hello?
I'm with you, sir. We are with you. Go on, please.
Hello?
Good morning, sir. We are with you. Go on.
Solomon Akitunde is my name.
All right.
I'm speaking from Jos.
All right, Mr. Solomon, go on, please.
Hello?
Turn down the volume of your TV set, sir. If not, you can hear me clearly.
Please, can you hear me?
Turn down the volume of your TV set. All right, please, to our callers, do remember to turn down the volume of your TV set. If not, you won't hear me, and then we'll just, you really not get to understand what we are talking about here. So please, do remember to turn down the volume of your TV set. So Richard, I was saying, so we have to do something about this number. It's quite alarming. 800,000 children yearly. So if we're going to divide this 800,000 by per month, how many children die? You know that the number is still high. We have another call. Hello, morning, sir.
Mike, I'm calling from Abuja.
All right, please go on, sir.
Hello?
I'm with you, sir. Go on, please.
Okay, I want to comment on this headline that said no litigation will stop the spreading of Tinubu.
Yes, sir.
My confusion is, does this government still want to start by this their attitude of disobey court order to the head? Does it mean that if there is a court order saying there should be no inauguration on May 29, Buhari and all of them, whatever their name are called, will go ahead to do the inauguration? Because I'm confused, but I've seen this as in almost all the newspapers this morning. No litigation will stop the inauguration of Tinubu. That means even if court, there is a judgment stopping it before that May 29, they will go ahead. Because we have been hearing about so many court orders, like, for example, in the court has said, okay, this is this man, and he stayed there in detention. Does it mean that they will continue to disobey court order to the end? Because I'm confused. I don't know what they meant by that statement. No litigation. Even if court say stop, they will not stop. Is that what you mean? I don't know where we are going in this country. Only God knows where we are going, because it has gotten to a time that this APC government has succeeded in. In fact, the judiciary is just nothing to them. So as far as their word is concerned, they can do away with anything as they want it, whether they court order or not. Let's see how it goes. I just pray there is a judgment before that May 29. Let's see whether Buhari will still continue to hand over to Tinubu.
Thank you so much for that caller. Of course, before we go back to our 800,000 malnutrition of kids that are malnourished, it's important that we revisit the story again, looking at what our caller just, the point he made on where we have no dedication will stop. Of course, you know, and I think issues like this come up. If you remember, Rachel, we kept saying during the cash, when we had the cash crisis, where I think the court said we could go ahead to use, and where we had to wait for the CBN government and the president to say something, because he initially said the old 200 naira. Now, all of this thing, you will begin to ask questions, where is the separation of power? I kept asking this question because in the government where we have separation of power, you will see that where the judiciary have to make a hearing, where the executive have said something, where the legislative have actually set a law, we're expecting to see a full law back to back. But then sometimes we begin to see interference in certain powers. And I think that needs to be spelled very clearly as we are having an incoming administration, because basically right now, as it looks, very little or nothing can be done right now. But I'm hoping that we'll follow the court hearing, whatever the judgment is from the court. I am hoping and I am believing that the government of the day presently will obey the court hearing and not go ahead with whatever it is at the end of the day.
So the implication of such statement coming from the federal government is saying that they already know what the verdict or the result will be, which indirectly means they are telling us we've bought the judiciary and they are under us. That's the implication. It might not be directly, but it's indirectly passing that message to us. We saw that happening, just as we said, when we had the cash crunch and then the crisis concerning who to do this and who. The government so far have showed us autocracy when it comes to ruling Nigeria so far, and that's what we've witnessed over the years under Buhari's administration, that is what the presidency says stands, and there has been no division of power whatsoever. It's almost like the judiciary are just there to say they are there, but nothing they've said so far stood and have been acted upon as it should be immediately. That's what we have witnessed. And for such statement to keep coming up on the paper, it's almost like the federal government saying, we already know what the verdict would be coming from the court. We already know what the ruling will be in the court. The federal government are indirectly telling us that, you know what, whatever is going on in that court, we already know the output, and May 29 stands regardless of it, because we already know what is going to be the verdict. And it's really sad, because we don't want that kind of system of government. It should be a system of government where everybody is waiting and anticipating, not knowing what will be the outcome in the court, what the tribunal will be, the final judgment coming from the judges and all of that. But when they say something like that, it feels like we've seen the future. We already know that regardless of what happens in the court, regardless of the proofs, whatever party is bringing with their petition, we already know that this is what the court will say. So this is as it stands. And it's really a sad thing hearing something like that coming from them, knowing that there's an ongoing tribunal petition, left, right, center, and a lot of uncertainty. But the federal government are telling us we are certain that this is not going to change. So it implies a lot of things that might not be out there directly, but it's indirectly in between the lines we are reading such messages.
Well, Rachel, we just hope that the court would do the right thing, and we hope that the government, the government will obey. Then quickly round up on the Nature newspaper, where we have on NIDCOM state takes healthcare notches higher. Start the NIDCOM SAT healthcare. You can find more of that. Downside, we have 19 wrestlers arrive Tunisia for 2023 African Wrestling Championship, which you can find on page 21. We have a picture story here. The permanent secretary and other participants at the Niger Basic Authority National Workshop in Abuja. We hope that whatever they will talk about will be for the better of the country, and that's how far we can go on the program today. The Dailies. Thanks so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you to all our callers who called in here to actually air their views and stories of really, really good relevance. And we hope that as, you know, citizens of the country, we will play our part to make sure that Nigeria becomes a great and powerful country that we want it to be. Until we come here again next week, to have a blessed weekend ahead.